Hi there, outdoor gear chat today. I am very excited about this. We just had a bit of pre-chat beforehand, which is amusing me immensely already, but I'm joined as always by Cathy. Hi, Cathy.
Hi, I'm Cathy. I'm the director and co-owner of Joe Brown's and the Climber Shop.
And we're talking about carabiners today. So continuing with the childish titles of I Need a Screw. And we're joined today by a legend in the carabiner world. Is that fair to say, Cathy?
I think so. I think Czar of Carabiners could actually be added to his very, very long list of job titles here. We're joined by Chris Rowlands from DMM, who actually started at 29 years ago in the heat treatment room, moved into the press shop, then took on role as training manager, became export manager, and then marketing and brand manager, settling now as export sales manager now, I believe, Chris. It seems like you've gone through a massive amount of experience over your 29 years at DMM, and you're based in Llanberis. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks very much for that, Cathy. Yes, yeah.
Well, we got to say Bore Da and Shemai.
Bore Da, very good.
That's my my Welsh from 2 weeks ago. I was down in Llanberis commentating on an event, and with Lowry Morgan. It was just amazing, the most amazing thing. I properly fell in love with Llanberis over that weekend. Beautiful. We were at the Slate Museum. So hi Chris, thanks for joining us. I think we've got to go straight in with the climbing axe handle story.
Oh,
that
right.
You just told us off air. I've just got just to lighten the mood. Let's just go straight in with that. I need, and for my entertainment.
Nothing to do with carabiners, obviously, but
no.
It was how I ended up actually in one of the many departments I've worked in at DMM. Was we were having trouble actually putting the rubber grips on the Predator ice axe, and a lot of your viewers will probably remember the old Predator ice axe, which was the first fully curved ice tool. And somebody had the bright idea to ask me, because they said, oh, he used to be a PE teacher, he'll know how to put cricket bat handles on. So I turned up to help them there for just an afternoon, and then ended up working in that department for about 2 years.
I love that. So it's just tickled me on all sorts of levels. That it's just the brilliance of that leap, isn't it? He's put cricket bat handles on. Well, yeah, this will be easy for him then. Yeah, fantastic.
It wasn't that easy either. So.
I know. I can well imagine. Yeah. So yeah, you are here to talk about carabiners today. So the starting point is for me. What is a carabiner? What's it all about, and why do we need different types?
Gosh, right. Well, there's lots of questions within one question.
Yeah,
really.
I know.
But I mean, carabiners came on the scene. They were actually designed by a man called Otto Herzog, and they were nothing to do with climbing. They were actually a carbine hook, which was a clip really to clip your rifle to a lanyard or whatever.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And it wasn't actually until quite a few years later, that was sort of, pre-First World War. It wasn't until, quite a few years later that carabiners actually started being used, for the specific purpose of climbing. And it wasn't until just Second World War that the first aluminium carabiners were designed. And obviously, aluminium carabiners, which we all use nowadays, had the massive advantage of being much, much lighter. But yes, you're right. There are lots and lots of different carabiners, and the first ones would have been made of steel, and they would have had a simple straight gate, is what we would, call it nowadays, mechanism. And being made out of steel, obviously, they were still pretty strong, but they were obviously very, very heavy. And they've gone through lots and lots of different developments over the years. That there are lots of different shapes, as you alluded to. There's offset D shapes, there's oval shapes, there's HMS shapes, and they all serve different purposes. And likewise, there are different gate options on carabiners. As I said, the first ones would have had a solid aluminium or steel gate. And then we've progressed through wire gates, and then we've progressed through the the closure mechanism through what we would now refer to as clean nose gates, where there's no hook on the end to snag on things. All sorts of different weird and wonderful things. Straight gates, and then obviously bent gates were added to the mix to make rope clipping easier. But yeah, they've all got specific advantages and jobs to do.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we love our climbing walls in all of our shops because they're just rows and rows of sparkly carabiners. We've actually got some of the original steel ovals up in the loft in Llanberis, which are sort of left over from, I like to think they're left over from Joe, but I think they've probably been donated over the years by various different customers. But oh my word, they do weigh a ton. But there's just so many to choose from, and they're all perfectly designed for their own particular job. And as you said, Chris, all these different shapes are determined by the sort of load that each carabiner is designed to take, and which the direction of that load that's going to go on it. So, for example, a D shape sort of readily positions the rope and tape, if you like, down, or the load down the strongest axis, which is the spine of the carabiner, or the back of the carabiner, if you like. The oval carabiners are still in use, a symmetric shape, but they're used for even loading. So things like pulleys, they come into their own for that. HMS or pear-shaped carabiners are sort of high capacity, so they can be used for connecting multiple or bulky items if you've got lots of knots going through them, for example, on belays. If you've got two different directions of pull on a belay, then that's when they come into their own. And then you've got things like wide opening carabiners as well, so the gate can open as wide as possible if you're doing via ferrata, for example, and you're clipping cables and things like that, then they come into their own. So it's important when you're sort of buying carabiners to sort of understand what and how you're going to use them, so you can make sure you've got the right one for the job. Because I know, Chris, you'll probably be able to explain, as part of that shape process, there's a very different strength rating for all of those as well. But each individual carabiner has that stamped on them, doesn't it? If you look on the back bar or the spine of the carabiner, there's always 3 different strength ratings. Can you just explain what those are for us, Chris? What the different ones are?
Certainly. Yes, there are, as you say, there are 3 strength ratings. One is what we would call major axis. So that is if you were to pull the carabiner to destruction, loaded top and bottom, and loading it down the spine of the carabiner. The next one would be what we call minor axis, which is across. So if you loaded it from the gate side across to the spine side. And the third one is gate open, which is probably one of the most important specifications on there. That's if you load it down the spine, as in the major axis, but with the gate in its open position. And there are minimum requirements that the standard requires to achieve. So, for example, 20 kilonewtons major axis and 7 kilonewtons gate open. And it's obviously the manufacturer's aim is to not just achieve those ratings, but to actually build in some extra safety margin in there as well. So if you pick up a DMM carabiner, you'll find that we will actually overachieve in terms of against the standard.
What do those numbers mean then? The kilonewtons, did you say? What would they
kilonewtons? Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a measurement of force. And the very first carabiners would have had no markings on them at all, and probably the steel ones that Cathy's mentioned probably have got absolutely nothing on at all. Just like actually, Cathy, the very first ones I did buy from Joe Brown's, which were steel carabiners, which were appalling, I've got to say. They had a gate that was a bit like Arkwright's till and open all out.
Fantastic.
It was so snappy that it almost took your fingers off. And then they would put just like a rating in kilograms, which or pounds even, which is sort of meaningless because it is force that you're dealing with in a climbing situation. So if you look at 24 kilonewtons newtons as a measurement of force. It's the equivalent of, say, 2.4 tons. So that major axis strength is absolutely amazing when you think that you're achieving that strength out of something that will weigh under 30 grams.
Yeah, wow. That, and then because one of the questions, obviously, well, for me as a non-climber, really, is about dangling stuff off a carabiner. So what sort of weight are you going to get at the start? Yeah, some one way is, can you really dangle a car or whatever off a carabiner? And I guess theoretically that's possible then.
Yeah. Not even theoretically, Wayne.
Yeah.
No, they've done it. If you watch the it's the DM, I'm just trying to think which film it is, Chris. It's the DMM history film, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
as part of your anniversary last year.
Yeah,
and they do actually dangle a car from one. Oh, I don't even know which size cam it was, actually.
I'm not sure which size cam it was, but that's Fred Hall. Yeah, in a a small hatchback. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It does make people are amazed when you say, you hand them a small carabiner and you say, what do you think this could pick up easily? And they go, oh, maybe me and my mate, or me and my 3 mates. And then you go, well, actually, it'll probably pick up, your dad's car with all of you in it as well. So
yeah, wow, that is remarkable, isn't it? Yeah.
They are incredibly strong. Yeah. But it's probably the gate open strength is something that people are quite keen on, because most carabiners will not break unless they are used incorrectly, or they have suffered some sort of trauma in the past. But obviously, being significantly weaker with the gate open, that's the strength that you're actually trying to achieve. That's so an important strength, because a snap gate, as we would refer to them, as a non-locking carabiner, which are used on quick draws, by nature of the beast, it can open. Right. It can accidentally open. And in a fall situation where carabiners are bashing around, maybe hitting against the rock, or all sorts of things happening, the gate can momentarily open. And if you were unlucky enough to load it at that point, in a serious fall or a dangerous fall situation where you're generating high loads, you could be getting towards that 7 kilonewtons minimum strength rating. So the actual gate open strength is the one that we're actually more interested in than the major axis.
Right.
Well, that and the minor axis, the cross loading, because again, if a carabiner accidentally gets loaded in its worst position, i.e. across the gate and the spine, then that's when it's usually pretty weak.
Yeah.
You have to remember that we say that's 24 kilonewtons, that's amazingly strong, but that's when it's loaded in its correct way.
Yeah.
And that's also how design comes into it. I think Cathy alluded to that early on when she said they loaded down the spine. And that's why the carabiner is designed to try to encourage the rope and the quick draw to make sure it is loaded in that.
It's loaded right.
That correct way.
Or I guess even if it's loaded incorrectly, it might adjust itself. Would that be right? Might the rope?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Down,
usually, the rope of the quick draw will try to right themselves into the right position. So when you look at a lot of modern carabiners, they will have, for example, a little groove in the rope end of the carabiner, which encourages the rope to seat there and therefore load correctly. But some of our carabiners in the past, which have got a bent back, so some carabiners have a straight spine, some have a bent back, and there's advantages of both. But a bent back will do a couple of things. Some people prefer the shape in the hand because they find it easier to handle. It'll also mean, and again, Cathy alluded to this earlier on, about the gate opening. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, a bent back will allow the gate to open slightly wider, which means it's easier to clip things in and out.
Yeah.
But also, and we learnt this with our first wire gate cleanos, which was the wire lock. Trying to cross load that was so difficult to set it in a jig to do the test, because it just wanted to right itself. So as you were loading it, it would try to right itself. So we actually had to file a little groove in the back of the carabiner to make sure that we could actually load it to do the test.
That's awesome.
So that's where the design comes in. That's where the clever people in our design department can try to make the carabiner as safe as possible as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I know, having been on 2 fantastic DMM factory tours, I have to say, they when I had the opportunity to go again this year, I did a little jump with glee, because I absolutely love watching the whole process. It's just fascinating, and I know DMM do offer tours periodically around your Llanberis factory, but we've actually popped a link to the full DMM factory tour online on our Joe Brown Outdoor Academy. So that's well worth a watch. And there is, if you just have a little search on YouTube, there's an unbelievable drone tour as well, and the drone actually goes through the forge that stamps out the carabiners. I still can't get my head around how it managed to do that and didn't get sucked up by the hot air. But it's phenomenal. If you just take a search for that, it's well worth a watch. But the whole process and the energy involved in making them, when you're standing next to the press and you can feel all that energy going through the ground and up through your bones as one little carabiner comes out, is incredible. And you make all of your tooling on site as well, don't you, Chris? So there's jigs everywhere, beautiful technical drawings, and then you can follow the whole process through when you go through, right through to the testing room, which is just downright scary. You kind of look up and there's all sorts of bits of broken things that you never want to see broken, embedded
or stuff dangling from the ceiling. Yeah.
It's very reassuring, actually.
Yes, we like to break things.
Well, in the best possible way.
In the best possible
you like to break it in the factory rather than elsewhere. Well, I think that's an important thing, isn't it? We've jumped right into all the technical stuff, but I guess the fact is the product's made in Llanberis and has been for some time. Just explain to us a little bit about the history then, a little bit more about the history of the company.
It's an interesting one because there's been like a history of manufacturing of climbing equipment and safety equipment in North Wales going back to the 1960s, when there was a company called Clog and Climbing Gear, which most people refer to as Clog, and a lot of people will recognize the name and they'll all be going, I've still got some of those carabiners. And they were a great company, and they made some wonderful carabiners, wonderful climbing equipment. But sadly, in the late 70s, the country was going through a bit of a recession. There were very difficult economic times. Long story short, Clog went into receivership, and the man who was responsible for forming Clog actually then went and started another company called Morehouse Engineering in Bethesda, and to begin with, making mainly more in just what we would call industrial products like cargo restraint and things like that, steel hooks, buckles, but very quickly, and that company had 4 employees in its early days, that rapidly grew as they then moved to Llanberis, to the factory site that we still got now, in 1986, and it's grown and grown and grown ever since. And I think we're 220, 230 on payroll at the moment. But the wonderful thing is that we have, over the years, we've stuck to our guns, and we have maintained the vast majority of our production in-house on the same site. So virtually all safety critical processes are carried out on site. And we're not saying that's the only way to do it. We're just very happy that we have stuck to our guns, that we're now an important employer in the local areas, you can imagine. And we've got a lot of employees who have worked for the company for many, many years. That's employees and directors. And we've got a lot of families who have got probably 2nd, 3rd generation, coming to work in the factory. And that's something that you can't just go out and buy overnight. You cannot buy that sort of expertise. If somebody's been designing carabiners, or if they've been putting carabiners together, or if they've been working on the forging presses for 30 years, they understand those elements, and that you can't buy that and find that overnight. So we're very pleased that we have a relatively small turnover of staff, and we have very experienced staff in key areas, and that's one of the things that helps us maintain what we hope is a very high standard of quality.
Yeah, and I guess that goes. Oh, sorry, Cathy, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm correct in saying you're the only climbing hardware manufacturer in the UK, aren't you?
We're the only climbing manufacturer, hardware climbing manufacturer left in the UK. Yes, in previous years there would have been Wild Country that was based in the Peak District.
Yeah.
There would have been Mountain Technology based up in Scotland.
Yeah.
Probably more famous for their ice tools and crampons. Then there would have been HB Climbing, which was based very locally to us here on the Llandergai estate in Bangor.
Yeah.
And sadly, those names have disappeared. So we are, to coin a phrase, last man standing.
I guess I was going to say that as we've spoken before on the podcast, Cathy, is that there's a great sustainability message within that, isn't there? We're able to see where products are designed, manufactured, produced, and then distributed from here in the UK, and it's not coming. It's not a massive footprint as far as the distribution's concerned.
No, and I mean, like back in the day, the parcels from DMM would arrive in our Clonberis shop by foot. These days, our orders are a little bit bigger, and they have to go up to our warehouse in Capel Curig. But that said, it's minimal distance, and then everybody who's buying within the UK is buying a British-made product, and the money is being kept within the country, and it's employing 230 people in Clonberis, where there's not a huge number of employment opportunities in the area, and in a manufacturing business as well, which is just fantastic. One of the other things that I loved on the tour round was just seeing at every stage bits of aluminium were just hauled off in wheelbarrows to the magic recycling skip. So there's nothing wasted there, even with the CNC machines and their little amazing robots that just take out tiny weensy, I don't even know what the measurement is, Chris. What's the measurement of metal that's scraped off by those? It's microscopic almost.
Yeah, I think microscopic is a good word.
Yeah, because it's
go with that.
Yeah, yes, it's just almost like aluminium dust that comes out, and that will get shipped off for recycling as well. Where
it does.
Where all of your polishing is done, water has to be added to that, obviously, doesn't it? To the are they ceramic? Pyramidy type things?
We use ceramic or porcelain, to do the metal finishing, the smoothing off of all sharp edges. So there's sort of big drums that's quite a noisy part of the factory, isn't it? They're just perpetually vibrating, and the carabiners just go round in the ceramic pyramid soup, and a polish. They come out looking amazing, and that water is all sent, and it's split out. The effluent is popped into a tank. Correct. Yes.
All of that is dealt with accordingly, and even your anodizing that's sent out to a company in Manchester. There's a brilliant video on your website about that, and they explain just how their environmental processes with that as well, because it's not a pleasant process, but things like they use organic dyes, and I think they use 50% less water, or 50% of their water is recycled, and they're working to an exceptionally high environmental level, and we've just agreed with DMM. I'm hoping we might be the first of your retailers to do this. I might be wrong there, Chris, but we'll be accepting in carabiners of any brand that are used and can no longer be climbed on. And we'll be sending those back to DMM, and DMM will pop those back into the recycling pot as well. So it's all part of working together to close this loop and to keep as much stuff out of landfill, particularly metals that can be aluminium it can be perpetually recycled, can't it?
Well, it's interesting one. Yes, as you say, we can take in all carabiners, and they will then go to a recycling company that we've been using for many years, and we can split the metals we use down into aluminium, into steel, stainless steel, and they can go off and they will get recycled. But what they can't actually come back as is PPE. So you're not allowed, the standard will state that you're not allowed to use recycled aluminium for PPE. So they will come back as, window frames, tent pegs, Coke cans, cola cans. I'm not allowed to.
All right, it's not Radio 1.
But that's really important. And it also, what it also does, it helps to dispose of things that might possibly be unsafe to climb on. So actually getting them out of circulation is a good thing. And I would think that probably, 90% of the people listening to this will go, I've got a load in the attic or a load in the loft, and I don't know what to do with, and I've only got one dog, so I only need one dog lead. It's like, it does that job as well. And the anodized that you mentioned, that's a very interesting point, because in the early days, obviously, carabiners were not anodized; they were just raw aluminium. And I've still got carabiners that, old clog carabiners actually, that were non-anodized, that probably as strong as the day they were made.
Not on your climbing rack though, hopefully, Chris.
Some of them for racking, but it's an interesting point you raise, that there is now no lifespan to a bit of hardware.
No, that's right.
And as long as it's not showing signs of corrosion, and as long as you haven't sort of dropped it under a bus, you can carry on using it. And some of the carabiners that I've got that are that old, I'll be quite happy to use. They will be as strong as the day they were made. But going back to the anodizing, which sometimes has had a bad press environmentally, because people say, "Oh, it's terrible. It's terribly bad for the environment." And the answer is there are lots of things that are bad for the environment, inverted commas. Like here is Tuesday night is bin night here, recycling. So I put my plastic, my tins, my glass out in separate bottles. If I just threw it out into the road, that's not good for the environment, but it's actually managing that waste in a proper, sustainable way. And as you said, an anodizing plant nowadays, I'm pretty certain if it has over a certain number of employees, has to conform to some very, very, very strict regulations. And then you've got the other argument that people will say that actually the anodizing is giving more longevity to the product, because the anodizing, which is putting that colored dye, that coating, that protection into the surface of the aluminium, it's not like a powder coating which would sit on top. It's actually in the surface, which will help protect it against corrosion, which is probably the biggest source of damage to carabiners is corrosion. If you're climbing in a salty atmosphere, sea cliff climbing, and you don't look after the carabiners, they can very quickly corrode. So anodizing is a very good thing. It will actually lengthen the use of your hardware potentially, as long as you continue to look after them. It's not going to be the magic cure, because you do have to service your equipment at regular intervals.
I was just going to say that's an important link in then, and a very nice one as far as care and maintenance to carabiners then. So what sort of things should people be bearing in mind as far as care and maintenance of them to make the lives longer if they're anodized, I guess, if we use that example rather than historical ones?
Well, there's lots of things there, Wayne, to be honest. It's people will come into one of your shops and they go, "Oh, how much?" You think, well, hold on, it's not that much. When you think that actually, if you do look after it correctly, and if you do read that little pamphlet, that the first thing you're probably going to do is rip off and throw away. If you do, yes, we've all done it. If you do read it, it will tell you how to look after it. Classic climbing scenario: you're out cragging, you try to get one more route in the day, it starts to rain, so you bail off, throw everything into the rucksack, leg it to the pub, Go home, leave the rucksack under the stairs, go back to work, and 3 weeks later you come back, open your rucksack, and you wonder why the cams don't work. It's because they're full of chalk, cheese butty, grit, all these things. They've got moving parts, just like a carabiner has. So, the very basic maintenance for carabiners is to wash them, and we state in the instructions the correct solution of a washing up liquid detergent in lukewarm water. Wash them properly, rinse them properly, allow them to dry naturally, just air dry. Don't stick them on top of the wood burner or in the oven or whatever. And it has been done. It has been done, believe me. And then you can re-lubricate, because it's got moving parts, and you can buy a very light duck oil, which would be a really good solution to that, and just add a very little bit. You don't need to go mad with it. Unfortunately, what people will do very often will think, oh, it's not working very good, I'll get the old WD-40 out, and without washing and rinsing first, spray a bit of that on, and that's quite gloopy, and then you can imagine that then attracts more grit and mud. So read the instructions, and they'll tell you exactly what to do with it.
I like that, as with everything in life. Yeah.
That's really good, because we often get the WD-40 question, and we often have to explain why that's not the best option. So that's a really clear explanation of why. That's absolutely super. Thanks, Chris.
Can I just jump in with some geekery just before you go on, Cathy? So when you were talking about the invention of the carabine earlier on, and the clipping it to weaponry and so on, I was wondering whether there's some background to the word carbine, and it turns out that there is. For the geeks, including myself, is cavalry troopers were called carabiniers, which came from the French carabine, from the old French carabine, a soldier armed with a musket. So presumably that's where the clip's name has come from historically. It's from these the French musket. How amazing!
Exactly.
So that also answers my question, as it should really be carabiner with a C and not carabiner with a K in that case, isn't it?
Well, that's googling it. That's before the show, that's what came up, was carabiner was definitely with a C rather than a K, which was an interesting one, isn't it?
The K has come in from Klettersteig in German, I suppose.
Sorry, so that was just me. I've lost the rest of the questions now.
You do like your entomology.
I absolutely love it. That is where words come from and so on. Going completely off topic, was the word clegg the other day. There was an exchange on Twitter about horseflies and where the word clegg came from. And anyway, we won't go into that right now. But as with everything, it's the Vikings for me. But what did we mention about aging of aluminium as well as within the process? I'm not sure whether we talked about that.
I wrote this down as a note because on the tour we ended up in the aging section, and I thought, surely with climbing gear the last thing you want to do is age it. No. So Chris, can you explain why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So the aging is actually part of a process that we would call heat treatment. And it's probably easiest to demonstrate that, or to say that it's very similar. People will have heard of hardening and tempering of steel, which is basically cooking and quenching and then reheating of steel to make it harder and tougher. But you do the same thing with aluminium. So when we buy the aluminium in, we will buy it in. It might come in what we would call soft annealed state. So it might be very, very soft and bendy, or it might come in what is termed T6, which is, fully heat treated, which probably needs nothing at the moment. So I'll try to explain that. If we made a carabiner, standard snapgate carabiner, non-locking carabiner, and we didn't heat treat it, we've already said that it would do, say, 9 kilonewtons with the gate open and 24, major axis. So if we didn't heat treat it, it would probably do about 4 kilonewtons with the gate open. So that is not a carabiner that you want to be out climbing with.
No.
So what happens is we know what hardness we need to make that carabiner to make it achieve the strength. In fact, we know what hardness we want to make every single bit of aluminium that we use in DMM. So every single bit of aluminium that comes out of our factory is heat treated. And we've got a cookbook. So we've got our Jamie Oliver cookbook, which says this carabiner will get heat treated for the first stage of the heat treatment, which is solution treatment or hardening, where it'll get heated up to very, very close to its melting point. I can't tell you the exact temperatures because I'll have to kill you otherwise. But you could look it up in the Aluminium Federation cookbook and it will say 7075 aluminium alloy, which is what predominantly all carabiners are made out of, will harden between, say, 465 degrees and 470 something degrees. So where do you start? Well, we know exactly what temperatures to use, and we're working between plus or minus 1 degree, because all those furnaces that you saw, Cathy, are all linked to a PC and controlled by a PC. So we'll heat it up to a temperature very close to its melting point, and we'll hold it at that temperature for a specific period of time, and then we'll quench it in water. And what that does is basically align all the nice molecular structure in nice straight lines. If we left it at ambient temperature after we dunked it in the water, it would naturally age, getting back to your aging, and become harder and harder and harder. But what we do is we artificially age it, heat it up to another specific temperature, and hold it at that temperature for a specific time until it reaches the right hardness that we want it to be to achieve the strength. Too hard and it'll be brittle and won't get the strength. Too soft, it'll be bendy and useless like chewing gum.
Right. Well, awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need a visit to your factory. Is that's on my list of places to go. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll go with you because I'll go around a third time.
Brilliant. That's it. We'll take a trip down there. Yeah, trip to Clonberris.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Brilliant. So yeah, we have got a less than a minute to go now. So thank you very much, Chris. Absolutely fascinating insight to what you do at DMM. And yeah, feel as always with these, feel well, I was going to say a lot educated by our chat today. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
So we have links on our Joe Brown Outdoor Academy website to all of the DMM tips on how to care for carabiners, how to inspect carabiners, how to also look after your cams and other hardware. That's on www.joebrownoutdooracademy.com. And then we also have our sales website where you can go and buy as much DMM equipment as you want at www.climbers-shop.com.